You go down to IAPA and you're just like, you see something like, oh, we've got to have this. And
Right.
this is why it's important. You got to go through this checklist.
Hi, I'm Russ, and this is the Memory Makers Podcast, the show that helps you create amazing customer experiences and make more memories. Da-da-da-da-da. Memory Makers. That's a little original for you, Mikey Mike, keeping it fresh for you. I am so excited today. We are joined by none other than Mr. Clint Novak from A&A Global. Clint, how are you, my man?
I'm doing fabulous. Yourself?
Oh, if I was any better, I'd be a twin, and nobody wants that. So I'm having too much fun for one person. So, how's the week been treating you? And are you staying out of trouble?
Okay. Staying out of trouble, I don't know about that, but I'm doing my best to stay out of trouble.
There you go. That's right. It's a good little spice of life, so it's always good to hear to hear that nobody's completely out of trouble when it comes to that stuff, which is good. So, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of meeting Clint, Clint is one, not only has recently joined A&A, but even more exciting, has years of experience as an operator, and so he's in such a great position for the topics that we're going to talk through today, just being on both sides of the industry now and having some great insights. And so, Clint, you had recently written an article, and remind me of which publication it was put in so we can give them proper love.
It was in Replay Magazine.
Replay Magazine. And so the focus of that article were, some critical criteria and things to consider when making buying decisions for attractions or looking at operational requirements and all of that. And so we're going to go through some of those points as well as share some of the life lessons or real world examples that you went through in order to develop some of that criteria. And so I'm really excited for the audience to be able to shorten their learning curve by having a seasoned pro like yourself be able to give some good insights.
I just don't want people to make all of the same mistakes I have made. So I try to make it easier for them. So the mistakes have already been made. Let's just work together so we can make everybody successful. So
sharing is caring for sure. So before we get into that too hot and heavy, for those who didn't know, give us a little bit of background as far as how you got into the industry and to where you are now, and then we'll jump in.
Sure. I started in the industry in 1999 working as a ride operator at Valley Fair in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
There we go.
And that really kind of started my love of roller coasters. I kind of became obsessed. I still kind of am.
Yeah.
So I traveled all over riding roller coasters, going to amusement parks. And then it was like that was in 1999. I didn't start working in the industry until 2013, 2014 when I started working at Funland of Fredericksburg.
Right.
And I joined the staff there as a ride operator and worked my way up to general manager within a year. And then I was a general manager for 8 years at Funland of Fredericksburg, and we really transformed that facility from a aging 90s arcade into the best breakout FEC in 2023.
I love it.
And, there's a lot that goes behind that. I mean, we had a commitment, a direction we were going in to make it a better place. But I also had a unique perspective because I am such a huge fan of the industry that going to places as a guest really gave me a different perception of even operating the facility itself, because I was always looking at it from a guest perspective.
Yeah.
I hate waiting in lines. I don't want to wait in lines. How do we get rid of lines? How do we make it a better experience? all of those kind of things went into all of the decision making as we built Funland into what it is today. So, and then in 2023, Memorial Day 2023, 5-star Parks and Attractions purchased Funland of Fredericksburg and Fairfax. And then by the end of 2023, I had phased myself out of the 5-star company and in with A&A Global. And so I kind of went I made the trek all the way around. I was media for a while, and then I was an operator, and now I'm a vendor. But really, even though I'm a vendor, I'm with A&A Global. My job description really is I go around and I help other operators be better.
Yeah.
And sharing that information, just doing whatever we can to give them added value as part of our clients. And so really, I still consider myself an operator, even though I'm technically a vendor. So
Yeah.
that's kind of that in a nutshell.
I love that. And it's so funny, right? Because when we talk to folks that are in the industry, you get this kind of big gap, right? Where you've got a lot of folks that are just either new to the operations side and are just getting their foot in the door, or hey, we've been in this industry on the vendor side for like 20 some years, right? Because it's hard for us to find work in the real world, because it's such a fantastic industry, no matter whether you're on the operations side or you go over to the vendor supplier dark side, I guess, if we're going to paint ourselves in that light. But I totally agree with you. We've done a couple of episodes that we've recorded this week, and one of which we were talking with Brittany Betty at Betson, and she was talking about, it's so hard for people when you're running your business and you're going through these things to stop and keep the customer perspective in mind, like evaluating your location, identifying friction points or areas for improvement from that are easy to get nose blind to when you see it every day, and you do that by getting out and seeing other locations. And what then struck me about that is that because we get to work with so many different locations across the country and see so many fabulous operators doing great things, it helps us become better informed of what's working, what's not. Hey, have you thought about this? They've got some people that are in a similar situation that have tried these kinds of techniques. Like, it's such an ongoing, evolving, and sharing process, right? Of just continue it. How do we get better? How do we help others get better? Rising tide raises all boats. It's just, we're so stinking lucky to get to work in the industry that we do, for sure.
Yeah, and that's one of my favorite parts, really, is that everyone is so helpful. When I was working at Funland, I only had pretty much one day off a week. It was like Wednesday. And I often found myself on a Wednesday going to other facilities just to see their operations, to share information with them. How can I be better? How can they be better? If I went on vacation to Myrtle Beach, my wife is like, I'm going to go hang out on the beach. And I'm like, I'm going to go visit 6 arcades.
Dude.
And so it was like, now that's my job. Like, I get to go to Myrtle Beach and visit all these places. And I never thought I would make my way over to the vendor side because I'm so, operations centered. But one good thing is weekends off. So I've never had a weekend off in my life until I started working on this side of things. And now it's Monday through Friday. I'm like, what do I do on weekends?
Now we got all the more time in the world to go see more FECs.
I know. Yeah.
I totally resonate with you when we go. Sometimes when I travel for work, I'll have Tiff and Rinker come with me, and we'll go and hit up museums and hit up some other FECs and things in there. And I really have to, like, Tiff goes, okay, you've got 25 minutes, and then I expect you to be back here with us, like, being present as part of the experience, because I'm, looking at this, looking at that, peeking under the hood on all of those kinds of things. It's a virus in my brain that I just can't get out.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, let's jump into it. So in that article that we did, look at me trying to just take shine, that you did for Replay, one of the first things that you talk about is how do, when you're looking at a ride, so for a bigger attraction of something in that category, talking to other FECs and seeing what's popular and successful, don't always listen to your gut was one of the kind of recommendation points that you had.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that a little bit.
So, when you're starting to look for a new ride or attraction, oftentimes you're going to have ideas in your head like, this direction is going to be a good direction to go. And, really what you want to do is you want to find the most successful, attraction that's going to work in your facility. And it could be different in any facility. But you want to talk to the operators who operate similar facilities to yours, and then see what is the most attractive, ride or attraction that they may have in their lineup that you don't already have.
Right.
I'm not saying don't, buy prototypes and things like that, but oftentimes you want to try to match the success that other people have already have. So, one of those, for instances, for us was the SBF spin coaster. that is so popular right now.
Right.
We did a lot of research, and we're like, well, what would be a good fit for this? And that's when we came up with a spin coaster. We visited several facilities. We watched how it operated. We wanted to make sure that that was a good fit for what we wanted to do. So that's always the first step, is what kind of attraction is going to be the best fit. And, again, you might only have a 10 by 10 space.
Right.
So, a laser maze might be the only thing that fits in there,
right.
or PR or so, there's, but
laws of physics first, and then wants and needs come second.
Exactly. So it's like, and for Funland, we were lucky because we had so much space to work with.
Right.
And we had aging attractions that we knew we could get rid of and then bring in newer attractions as well. So in the 8 years I was there, we were putting in rides and attractions every single year. Sometimes we were doing twice a year, spring and fall. And so we just got so excited, and what we were doing was working with our guests that we were having a lot of fun with it, because building a new attraction is the fun part of the job.
For sure. Well, and I love that from a couple of reasons, and it reminds me of something that you would even see at like an Airway Lanes in Michigan, right? Where like they will have a new thing at the facility once a year and do almost like a mini grand opening every year around whatever that new component is, right? And keeping it fresh. And they've conditioned their customers to expect, hey, they've always got something new, something cooking, like, what's going to be the next thing that kind of comes around. And so I can imagine, the both sides of the coin of that. It can come with a lot of things. One, you're having to do a lot more vetting, a lot more working through a process, but it means that when you are making attraction selections, you've got to have a good criteria of understanding how this thing is most likely to perform, finding those similar examples of, hey, this is how they're using it. This is the good, the bad, the ugly that they're seeing with it. What do we need to do to mitigate some of that stuff or really emphasize the great points of it? But so it keeps it fresh for the staff, keeps it fresh for the guests. And it just doesn't allow you to get complacent with it. And so I love that mindset, because it keeps you constantly changing and evolving. When you guys are looking for a space, or not looking for a space, but an attraction rather, would you guys look at it from, hey, would you start with, what are some cool things that are out there? Okay, well, this is geared more towards this demographic. That's not really who we're going to be targeting. Like, how would you start to frame that? Would you say, gosh, we would really love to have more for corporate business, and so we're going to start looking at things that we see that start to really lend themselves to that? Or would it just be, hey, we're going to go to IAPA and we're just going to go with an open book and we're just going to see all different kinds of things and then start to see what gets us excited?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a little of both. Sometimes, like I said, there's space constraints. So you're like, okay, what would fit in this space? And that's how we ended up with Clip and Climb, which is funny because we were actually looking at a space that was like, it's in between two bathrooms, and there was like a 30-foot like wall that we're like, okay, let's do something with this. I was like, oh, Clip and Climb would work here. And then 6 months later, when we put it in, it didn't go where the bathrooms were. It went right, I guess, like right when you walked in, it was like right in your face. And it was way better going there. But it's funny how we started to fill a problem. And then we were like, well, if we're going to spend all this money, we might as well just forget the problem and put it where we want it.
Right.
And then when we were building Clip and Climb, putting the blueprints together for Clip and Climb, I was like, well, there's a spin coaster we always talked about. If the only place in the building it would fit is right behind Clip and Climb, and we'd have to move Clip and Climb 4 feet forward. And the owner was like, Clint, we're not buying this roller coaster. And I was like, okay. It's like, that's fine. And I'm fine with that. But if we wanted to, we have to move Clip and Climb 4 feet forward. We might as well do that now. And so he said, okay, go ahead and move Clip and Climb 4 feet forward, but we're not buying the roller coaster. And then 3 days later, we had the down payment on the roller coaster. So,
diabolical.
And it fit perfectly right behind Clip and Climb there. So, but yeah, I mean, it always depends on, whatever you're trying to, again, you could have those questions like, what would bring in more corporate events and things like that. And, but I guess we were always just trying to, make sure that it fit our demographic, which was teens, families. We didn't want to go too kid friendly. We did remove a lot of the kid friendly stuff, like the play zone,
Gotcha.
some of the kiddie rides, and kind of went more towards the, we had a Chuck E. Cheese across the street. We had a Sky Zone across the street. So
Makes
we were
sense.
just trying to catch that, teenage and up demographic. So.
Sure. So yeah, that's interesting. Sometimes you're going to make decisions based off of what physically do we have room to do anything with, and what is going to have to get shaken up in the Etch-a-Sketch, if we're going to make a change or do something new. But sounds like you guys were on a constant point of how are we going to have new things to capture the attention span of that age group that has a shorter attention span in general. So it's like that may also lead into why you guys were doing as many updates and changes, over that period of time. I love it.
Yeah, and I mean, and like you said, sometimes you go down to IAPA and you're just like, you see something like, oh, we've got to have this. And
Right.
this is why it's important, you got to go through this checklist. You can't just get the checkbook out and buy it. I had a friend who bought a huge Ninja Warrior course from the show floor. Great deal. He gets it back to his facility, and it's 3 feet too tall to fit in his building.
Oh.
And so it's like, those are the things that you need to make sure that you're always going through and making sure that it's going to be a good fit. Literally in this sense, a good
Yes.
fit. It has to fit inside your building.
100%.
So, making sure that, you have to take those measurements. You have to make sure that it will fit in the space. When you're building a ride or attraction, sometimes, like, especially if it's a ride, it will need extra space for, let's say, compressors or a computer room or something for the control system of the ride. And so we were building rides outside. We put in SBF Visa Drop Tower and SBF Visa Midi Dance 360. And when they were being delivered, we found out that we actually had to have a building next to the rides to house the components of both of those rides.
Yeah.
And we were unaware of that. And so we had to, in this sense, we had to go back to the city and get more permits and build a building and get the stuff ready, so that when the components of the next ride arrived, we were able to get all that stuff together. So again, things that we didn't know we had to ask until,
right.
until we were in the thick of it. So
and sometimes you it's easy to get lost in the shuffle. Like I remember, when we were talking with folks about like our escape rooms, and they're going, well, in Tennessee, that's going to get classified under this attraction piece. And I'm like, well, tell me more about that. Well, it's like, well, you need an emergency shutoff. You need a this and that. I'm like, well, they're treating an escape room like a roller coaster. Like, so sometimes depending on, because, Pigeon Forge, it's a heavy market. You've got more of those kinds of things, and just how that market interprets what is needed or code compliance and things like, you look at something where, hey, we've got laser tag. Well, that gets treated like FF&E, fixtures, furnishings, and equipment, right? It doesn't come under the same scrutiny because it's not utilized the same way. Whereas something else like a drop tower, it's like, no, there's different levels of insurance. There's different levels of permitting. There's different, like, hey, you may not have clearance to do something so tall. Like there's a lot more that has to go in when you start getting into those more complex pieces.
And one thing we never even thought of when we were building these rides was lighting. So the lighting didn't pass code. And so we had to get special permission from our local government to be able to have the lighting packages on the rides, because, once you got to a certain height, I think it was like 20 feet, you couldn't have outward facing lights on it. And it was like, we've got outward facing lights on it. So
making several donations to county council members' campaigns before having that request go in, I'm sure. So
yeah. And we worked very well with our local government. We actually, at one point, were putting in a soaring eagle drop tower,
right?
Which is 120 feet tall or 135 feet tall. So we had to change the variance, because in our county, we were only allowed to build up to 90 feet. And so cell phone towers were able to be built at 200 feet. So we, for 2 years, were able to change the variant. So now it reads amusement rides up to 135 feet and communication towers up to 200 feet. So
there you go.
And
just
then
have them drop a 5G, have them drop a 5G dish on the top of that bad boy, and
there you go. It's a communications tower now.
I like it. Oh, that's awesome. Well, so, when you look at these bigger rides and things, right? Like you look at some of the indoor attractions or some of those things like a laser tag, like a mini golf, staffing those, you're going to have a game marshal in a laser tag experience. It's going to be much more of kind of facilitated, supervision that you're doing with that. When you're getting into things like go-karts and amusement rides, the operational requirements, like we talked about insurance, other things along those lines, what are some of your best recommendations on the operational checklist to consider of, hey, what's our true cost of ownership and implementation look like with this?
Well, okay, so again, we're going to go back to talking to others who have the ride or attraction. So if you're getting this attraction, talk to other people who have it, figure out what the problems are. Yeah, every ride's going to have problems. You're never going to have a piece that you put in, you never have to do maintenance. So there's always going to be maintenance. So don't be scared of that. But know what those issues are going in. And if the manufacturer is somebody that's going to be good to work with, because ultimately you guys are coming together for an extended period of time. If you're going to own this attraction for 20 years, you're going to be working with this manufacturer for 20 years now. So what do other people say about the manufacturer? Is it a good company to work for? Is it easy to get parts? Then you have to figure out what is the maintenance on the ride. Like, can your current maintenance staff handle the new ride or attraction? Because, new rides, the SBF spin coaster, you have to check tire pressure. There's NDTs that have to be done every year. You have to break apart the carts every year to have them inspected. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into a ride. Where an attraction might not be so labor intensive on the maintenance side. So that's a question you have to ask yourself. How many ride attendants does it take to operate the ride? Does it take one? Does it take two? Does it take three? What is the manufacturer recommendations for that ride or attraction? And can you appropriately staff that with, those recommendations? I went to a facility a couple of months ago, and they were showing me a ride, and they had two ride operators. That was a flat ride. They had two ride operators on there, and I said, can't you do that with one? And they said, no, the manufacturer requires two. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I would have not bought that ride because of that.
Right.
Because of those two people.
Right.
And then he said, and they have to be 18 or older to run this ride. Ooh. I was like, oh, you're out right there.
Yeah.
I mean, in our labor market, usually it's 16 plus.
Right.
And so, a lot of the people who are operating the rides or attractions are going to be in that 16 to 18 year range. So that would, all those would have been red flags for me to say, we can't add this attraction in.
Well, and not only that, but your 18 and pluses are typically going to be either more of like your shift managers or your higher level folks that like, they don't have the bandwidth to be solely staffing something along those lines.
Exactly.
With as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
So those are questions you have to ask. And then you're going to get into, the daily, weekly, monthly, yearly inspections or opening procedures, all those things. Are you going to be able to handle those? Do you, like with the drop tower, do you have the proper equipment to inspect the top of a drop tower? Do you have, lifts? Do you have, any of the things that are necessary to get up there?
Right.
Then you have to look at what parts need to be replaced on a yearly basis. So if you're looking at zip lines or ropes courses or drop towers, usually you have to replace the cable after a certain amount of uses. Harnesses have to be replaced after a certain amount of uses. So all of those things you have to look at and say, okay, well, there's going to be a yearly fee that we're going to have to pay to swap out these parts.
Yeah, that true cost of ownership.
Is there a licensing fee for the attraction? Are you going to have to continue to pay a fee to have the content that they're providing for you? Is there a rescue plan if you have a drop tower or a ride that goes way up in the air? How are you going to get those people off of that ride? Do you work with your local fire department to make sure that you have that rescue plan? So we did. We had a very good relationship with our local government. So we bring them in before the ride even opens so they can get an idea of how it works. Usually if it's under 90 feet, a ladder from a fire truck can reach that. Otherwise you have to get more creative. And usually the manufacturer will also have ideas as to how you're going to evacuate the ride if something were to go wrong. So, all operational things that you just have to think about. And then the guests come in and it's like, okay, well, You don't want to buy a ride or attraction that's 56 inches,
Right.
and you're trying to go for a young demographic, because they're never, they're gonna have to be 12 years old to be 56 inches. So,
yeah, you got to get those World Series 12-year-olds
exactly,
that are growing full mustaches.
So you want to make sure if your demographic is young, young teens, or even like 8 or 9-year-old, that's 42 inches or 36 inches. You want to look at those to make sure that you're going to hit that. Can the families ride together? Is there a weight limit? Is there a height limit? Like sometimes there's rides you can be too tall for.
Right.
So you need to make sure, is that something that you have to watch out for? So
would you typically run that by like whoever your insurance provider was for that and say, hey, I need you to take a look at this, and have them even do the additional due diligence of like, am I going to be able to get this underwritten? Like, do you work with like a Safe Park USA or a McGowan or whomever to say like, what should the policy actually be written to around this, and giving you guidelines on process and procedure for documenting everything for the audits? Like, what does that portion look like? Because I know that they have horror stories of like, hey, they bought these things, they bought go-karts, but then in their lease, they were specifically precluded from being able to use go-karts or what have you. So like involving your experts on the legal and the insurance side well ahead of the purchasing decision, I'm sure has got to be a factor.
Yeah, 100%. So just like, okay, involve your local government as soon as you have an idea of what you want to do. I know it sucks because they're going to throw up a lot of things, the questions and stuff, but at least they're asking them then instead of shutting down the ride to figure those things out.
Yeah.
And the same thing with your insurance company. If you're purchasing a ride or attraction that's already popular, if you're working with one of the industry insurance companies, they're already going to have an idea of how these operate, what parks have them, and maybe even can get you in touch with those parks if they have a good operating procedure for it. So yes, definitely including them in the decision making as well, at least in the sense, because like, at one point, I think we were going to add, we're looking at axe throwing. I don't think we were getting very serious about it, but we're looking at it, and our insurance company said, well, we don't cover axe throwing. And I was like, well, good thing we're not adding that then.
Well, and you had mentioned, you've got to have this good working relationship with the local government, right? Because if you do need a variance or something, like you need some relationships in place, so that way they need to understand who you are as a business and what your intentions are, so that way you're not just this, they want to do what in our town kind of a thing.
Exactly.
So how did you guys develop and foster good two-way relationships with them? I made the joke about making financial contributions in jest just because we're in an election year, and that's always a fun hot topic clickbaity thing that we'll use to get more views. But legitimately, like being able to go to council meetings and do like, the things that I've seen consistently work well with it is we want to, not just go to these meetings when we have an ask, so that way they can have some familiarity with us. But when we do have some of those asks, like it's helping paint the vision for them to see, hey, this is what this is going to do. This is the positive impact that it's going to have. Like, what would you guys consistently do when you're working with the city to help make sure that they understand, like, hey, we're doing our due diligence. This is the positive impacts that it's going to have. Here's how we move forward.
Well, there's a lot of things. First of all, it's being a part of your community. It's going to all of the functions that other people are throwing, and it's you throwing functions as well. You talked about, if you introduce a new ride, you have a big party. Well, that's what we did. We had a very every time we open an attraction, there was a timeline. We would have a Wednesday night would be an employee night. Employees could bring friends and family. We get them on the ride. We test the capacity. We're looking at the operations. Thursday was our big VIP night, which local government was invited. All of our vendors, so Pepsi, U.S. Foods.
Yeah, local news affiliates.
Yeah, anyone. Well, we didn't have a lot of news, but yes, all the radio stations, the newspaper, local to Fredericksburg, they were all invited. But I mean, we would invite 300-400 people, 200-300 of them would show up. Before we had alcohol, we would get an alcohol permit just for that night, and this was closed to the public. So this was the park was 100% open. And they would get to come and enjoy the park, and they looked forward to these parties. Like it was a great time. And we took, a half hour to do a presentation, whether it's introducing the new ride or it's going over our future plans. And so that was always a big deal, was that VIP night that we would throw. But it was also, not just going to the council meetings and stuff, but it's being part of the tourism board and working with them on functions on how can we help get people to our region, and how, what does that look like? And again, anytime the city is throwing a function, whether it's introducing their new welcome center, or
Chamber of Commerce president. Yeah,
you just go to the events, have lunch with the mayor, shake hands, make yourself known, and those relationships go a long ways, because once you have a good rapport with your city government, then when you do have to do something, it becomes a lot easier, because it's not people pushing against you, it's people trying to work with you to solve the problem. So
yeah, it's a topic that we could probably spend a lot of time on. Even when I was on the board for AAMA, Joe Camarado would talk about, he's a local elected official in his hometown and everything, but he was like, you've got to foster and nurture relationships with the local officials, because they have to have a true understanding for who you guys are and what you're doing, right? Like if you don't have a personal relationship, and they're going to look at you like you're trying to pull some kind of Tiger King nonsense, right? And just be a thorn in their side, like they're not going to want to work with you and do that. But you've got to show them that you are an active community member working towards the betterment of all of that. I love it, man.
Yeah. And when it comes to the city government, when we're bringing in a new ride or attraction, they don't know anything about these things. They don't know how they work. They don't know how they operate. They don't know how to make them safe. Yeah. And so they depend on third-party people to tell them that we're doing it correctly. Right. And then we have to depend on not only ourselves, that we're doing everything in our power to make it as safe as possible, but our insurance company, the manufacturer, everybody involved, because at the end of the day, we don't want it to become that kind of issue. We want it to be a very positive thing for the community and for us. So
I had a Frankie's Fun Park, when they were doing their location in Charlotte, right? It was just this massive, undertaking, right? It's 40 acres. It's incredible, right? But they were getting just beat up with the local ordinances, because Charlotte, that greater Charlotte area, you just got a lot more eyeballs on it. And it was also at a time where you had a lot of people working. This was, a post-COVID or on the thing where a lot of the folks who had worked on entertainment venues weren't there anymore. And so you had new people coming in, they're interpreting the IBI, or the International Building Code, or their local permits, like through a very black and white piece, and not understanding when and how it's appropriate for variances. But because of the fact that they had a good, hey, we're making ourselves a member of the community, before they were even breaking ground, they were doing a lot of just understanding who the players were. But, they wanted to add a second level into their laser tag arena. Well, we never really have any significant issues getting something like that executed, but there was such pushback from the city that we ended up having to go and meet with them for like a 2-hour window, and explaining, hey, here's a soft play structure that's in a McDonald's or a Chick-fil-A, right? And how that is less ADA compliant than what this thing is. Here's how we adopt the game. Here's how we do this. Because they just need to see that you are aware and are doing your homework and are making thoughtful and intelligent decisions when it comes around for that, because you have to be the expert advocating and highlighting the context and what you're trying to do, because they just may not have seen it before. And not to mention the fact that they were like, no, you can't do this second level structure. And I said, well, here's 12 locations within an X mile radius that all have these things. Like, this is very commonplace to do across the country. And it ended up working out, but it was definitely a dance to get there. But it was made so much easier because you've fostered relationships and people understand who you are as an entity and a business, and know that they can trust what you're saying because you've got a good track record with it.
Yeah. So. Well, and we had a similar experience. We had the RCI ropes course we put in. Yeah. And while we were putting that in and we're going through the permitting process, the building inspector said that the stairs were not ADA compliant. And we said, well, the stairs is part of the attraction. Once you're already in the attraction, when you go up the stairs, I mean, the obstacles are not ADA compliant. Right. And the stairs, you have to just think as they're a part of the obstacle to get up to another level. And so we had to work with RCI to, give them that information and everything. And eventually they said, okay, you're right. You're already harnessed in. The stairs are not, a part of the building, but a part of the attraction. So
for sure. Always fun. Yeah, we'll put a montage episode from all of our operators on what's your favorite local government permitting shenanigans story that you want to do.
The lighting by far was the one that caught me most off guard, though, because I wasn't even expecting it. They were like, you're not allowed to have lights above 20 feet. And we're like, what? The parking lot lights are above 20 feet. And they're like, yeah, but they're facing down. And I was like, okay, so this is okay.
Yeah. Well, you can start hosting some high school football games and just get some of that stadium lighting in there and go from there. So awesome. Well, Clint, I've thoroughly enjoyed getting into some of these pieces. What I'd love to do is we get to the end of each of these episodes, I always like to ask, just because we have so many great partners that are switched on cats and are constantly feeding the beast, so to speak, of growing and improving. What is either an episode of a podcast or an audiobook or a quote or something that you've been that's been living in your brain recently that you've really enjoyed and would like to share?
Well, first, I want to give a shout out to all the A&A people, because a lot of the sales staff, including Jerry, listen to the podcast. And so
shout
when
out.
I said earlier today, I was, I'm on the Memory Makers file. He's what? He got really excited. So
you guys are going to blow up our ego. I just assume no one listens and that these are just fun conversations that we have. It helps me be less professional.
No, we're all listening. So
I love it.
My quote, this is a quote that I had in my office at Funland on a big board with the Magic Kingdom as the backdrop of it. And it's a Disney quote. And it said, "Around here, however, we don't look backwards for very long. We keep moving forward, opening up new doors and new things. And curiosity keeps leading us down new paths." Oof. And I had this because we never, you never want to get stuck in your old, this is the Funland way, or attached to things that are not going to be profitable.
Right.
But we had to learn to let go of sometimes we would come in there with an idea and we would run with that idea, and you just had to know when to say, okay, this isn't an idea that's going to work.
Right.
It worked for somebody else. It didn't work for us. Cut it loose, move on. So I love that quote, because it was always, we're never done. We're always just going to keep moving in a direction to keep making things better.
Oh man, I love that. I got goosebumps as you were getting through that one, man. I love that. That is absolutely fantastic. Well, Clint, thank you so much for sharing your insights and knowledge. I know that there's a lot of awesome stuff for people to be able to unpack as they do that. And, with that, I think we're at a great spot to wrap. But if you guys have any ideas for future episodes, we come out with these every week. And if you guys have something that you'd like for us to dive into further, please hit us up on social media. We'll make sure to get those wrapped in, as well as anytime that you're listening. If you've liked what you've heard, give us that 5-star review, please and thank you, if we've earned it, which I hope we have. And, with that, I just want to say thank you to Mikey Mike on the 1s and 2s working the Ultranet for us. Thank you all for listening. And, go out there and make some memories, everybody. We appreciate you, Troublemakers.